Actually, I do remember someone promising something about parables, but something else came across my plate that I felt is more pressing to talk to youth and youth in general about. And it stems from our last gospel reading last Sunday, the temptations. And it has to do with a word called secularism. How many of you know what that word means? Secularism. Okay, we'll get to that. What were those three temptations last Sunday? First one was turn bread into stones, right? Stones into bread. And Christ says, man shall not live, or man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God. And if we just stopped at this parable, at this temptation, we can see secularism at work. How many of us thought when we heard this, Christ's response, man does not live by bread alone? How many of us said, it's nice, but actually I need to eat? Right? How many of us, if we were challenged to go into a room with our Bibles, how long do you think we would live? Just reading our Bibles, right? Eventually, we need something to eat with our mouths. Now, that reaction of, yeah, right, man does not live by bread alone. Yeah, we need bread. Our problem is not with the word bread. Right? Our problem is with another word. What's that other word? No. No. Live. We eat, and we can eat all we want, but we're still going to die. So what is God talking about? What's Christ talking about? Our life is not in the food that we eat, but our life is in the Word of God, or every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. Why do we go to this, or we focus on bread right away? It's not just you, it's many people focus on that. Let's go to this word secularism. Secularism is the default position of our society. Secularism can be defined a couple of ways, but essentially it's the idea that the world and society that we live in is non-religious. Secularism, I'll give you the classic understanding, the classic definition. It is basically that everything that is non-religious, essentially, worldly, earthly, that is secular. So, I go to a museum, it's secular. I go to a baseball game, it's secular. I go to a park and throw a football around or kick a soccer ball around. I go to a club, all that is secular. I go to church, that's religious. That's non-secular. It's religious. I say a prayer. I go to confession. I go to Vespers. I go to this meeting. This is all religious. Paying my tithe to the church, religious. This is religious, not secular. Secular is what's in the world. Religious is what happens in the church or pertaining to God. A second way to understand secularism is the idea, pay attention, the idea that I can live a very full and satisfying life, a very noble life, a very giving life, a very loving life, without religious belief and without religious participation. That is a very, very common understanding among all of us. Right? How many of us said, it's a good Muslim, it's a good Jew, it's a good Buddhist, and if they're a good Buddhist, does that mean God is going to throw them in hell? This is the idea that we have in our mind. I can live a good life and I don't have to be associated with religion or God. That's secular. That's secularism. I can be an atheist and take a bullet for somebody. That's secularism, or that's how secularism plays out. And I'll give you this third definition, and then we'll go a little bit further into it. The third definition is that society has moved away from this idea of a belief in God, right? The belief in God years ago was unchallenged, was unproblematic, was not an issue. There is a God. And now we are in a society that belief in God is one option. And most of the time it's not the easiest option. It's probably the more difficult option. So, having said that, essentially, secularism is essentially the belief that there is a God, but this belief in God is removed from my daily life. This is what comes down to be what we call, or what can be called, what has been called, a two-story universe. 2 floors to the universe. Who's on the top floor? Huh?
Quantity-wise?
What?
Quantity-wise?
No, Who's on the top floor? God. Who's on the bottom floor? Us. There's a basement, but we don't have to talk about that. So this is in our mind. God is up there, we are down here. And this is what makes the world largely non-religious. I'm going to get to a point because it's affecting all of us. It's like we all drink the water and we all have the same disease that comes from this water, and we have to fight against it because most of our issues, most of our problems arise in church from this idea of secularism. If we have this understanding that God is on the second floor and we are on the first floor, what ends up happening is the things I do for God are done at a certain point of the day, a certain time of the week. Right? Then I have my daily life. I give to God what is God's, and then I live my life the rest of the week. Or, and I'm not being bad, I'm not being evil, I'm not doing anything wrong, but Sunday is Sunday, prayers in the morning and the evening, and then the rest of the day I got to be about my business because I live in the world, and that's what we have to do in order to succeed. I have to study, I have to go to class, I have to have a job. But the only problem is that when I make this separation of what is top floor and what is bottom floor, when I make this separation of what is top floor and bottom floor, then what ultimately ends up happening is that my beliefs can get challenged. There's only one person wearing a hat in this church. Sorry, my hair is like really bad. So now, what happens is when I have this first floor, second floor idea, belief, then my issues become problematic. And actually, Monica gave us a great setup for this. Because when we have doubts, the question comes around, maybe there's nobody up on the second floor. Maybe there's nobody up there. Somebody repeat for him what I just said before. There's only one person wearing a hat in this hat. Unless you're a woman and you want to cover your head in the presence of God. All right. So now, when we come to this problem, we start to have doubts. And I'll tell you where doubts come up. I've had to deal with a lot in the past week or two. Essentially, it comes like this. When you have a real struggle in your life, like, I had a relative of mine. He's in his 30s. He's got a 5-year-old son and a wife, obviously, and he passed away from cancer. So his wife is like, "Where's God? We prayed for a long time. Why didn't God answer these prayers?" Or even worse, had it been a situation where the child passed away. And if the child had passed away, the same question would have come about. Why didn't God save us. And I've had that situation as well, where a parent was like, I prayed for my daughter every night, that God would protect her, that God would keep her, and she died after 15 months. Where was God? Right? These are the doubts of who's on the second floor. And I'll give you an even bigger one. We just 2 weeks ago, more than 2 weeks ago, February, I guess it was 13th or 14th or 15th, right? What happened on February 15th? 21 people, at least, were killed. Weren't their families praying for them? Wasn't the church praying for them? In that period of time when they were kidnapped, didn't they pray for themselves? Right? So what happened? Where was God? It's a big deal. It's a big problem. And it's a big, what ends up happening is I need to understand where God is. But what I'm telling you today is we have a wrong understanding of the universe. This is what secularism sells to us. God's on the top floor, you're on the bottom floor. If you want to believe in God, fine, go ahead. But we're living in the bottom floor, so get used to it. But this is not the Orthodox church understanding. And we have an advantage because we've been around longer than secularism has been around. Secularism has come about when human beings, kicked God out of the world. Right? He kicked us out of the garden, right? And we returned the favor, we kicked him out of the world. And we wanted a time where we didn't have to deal with God. We want in our lives, we want to just have fun, right? I just want to be able to do what I need to do or live the life that I want to live. And so on some level, we kind of turn our back on this idea of God. The Orthodox Church is completely against this. If we were to say secularism is a heresy, you guys know what a heresy is, right? A heresy is like God was not human, or Jesus Christ was not human, or Jesus Christ was not God, or he was God mostly and just a little bit human, or he was just a little bit God and mostly human. There's all these different heresies. But if we were to talk about this secularism in terms of a heresy, it is a heresy against humanity, against who man is, against who we are in our relationship with God. At the heart of our understanding of secularism, at the heart of it is a destruction of worship. How is that so? How are we getting from existence of God to God not being here and kind of being here, and then we're going all the way back to worship? It is the exact opposite of worship. Worship is not just coming to church during the times of prayer. Worship is our life, all the time. And when we come to this idea of secularism and we have these doubts of people on the top floor, this is what causes us to start thinking about things in our own mind. Why would God kill so many people in the Old Testament? Why is evolution such a problem? Why is, for example, people suffering in the world? Why does God allow all that? All of these begin to attack me. And then I develop a type of agnostic attitude towards God. I don't know. It just doesn't make sense, right? It just doesn't all fit together. And so many of the people that you go to school with have this attitude. They can't get past these experiences in their lives. Maybe they had a parent that was very sick and God didn't answer their prayers, and so they decide, maybe God is not existing at that point, or God, doesn't exist, or no good God would allow that to happen. What we come to think is that, on another level, we think that our belief, orthodoxy, is simply a choice. Like I choose what I eat, I choose what I wear, I choose basically my career path. All of that is a choice. So God becomes a choice as well. What it ends up being is I live in a culture where I am a consumer. What does that mean? I consume. And so religion is a flavor, or religion is a choice, and I'm a consumer, and this is the one I choose to consume, or I don't choose to consume, right? This is the attitude that we have towards God. And this is not, we never taught you this, right? The church never taught you this. This is what you learned from society. This is what you learned from outside. You guys are getting a repeat of the sermon. So this has been my kick for the last for the last at least week or so. So when it becomes a flavor, becomes a choice, it becomes something I can consume, right? Then I have a choice. I don't have to. I don't have to take this. I don't have to believe in this. It's just something that, is been given to me, hasn't been given to other people. And so what essentially happens is, in this choice, my mind shifts. My mind shifts to the idea that I have an option. And you do have options. But in one level, you're comparing apples with oranges when you're talking about options, right? And what we fail to understand, and this is kind of, right, this is what somebody said to me the other day. He's like, if you ever have an atheist, or you ever have a non-believer, the best thing to do for that person is take them and bring them to witness an exorcism. And at that moment in time, they will believe in God. Because, and a Catholic priest in Orange County was telling another one of the fathers how he witnessed an exorcism here in Southern California. Things were flying in the room. This is somebody that I can bring you to, and he can talk to you about this. Things are flying in the room. And they're going to say, you don't believe in God? Can you stand in the face of this and say, it must be something in the room, some wind, some experiment, some trick, right? And then you go even further. Forget about exorcisms. What do we have in our church? Whose feast are we going to celebrate on Monday? Pope Carolus. Pope Carolus, right? In the Catholic Church, you need how many miracles in order to get a priest? Or to get a saint, make him a person a saint? You need like 2, right? How many books do we have of Pope Carolus miracles? Pages upon pages upon pages. How many of you know somebody who had a miracle done to them from your grandparents' age, of Pope Carolus, by Pope Carolus? Yeah, I do. I have one of my cousins was named by Pope Carolus when when his mother couldn't have a baby. He said, "Don't worry, the next kid you're going to have is a boy. Name him Mark," right? And so more than 9 months later, she wasn't even pregnant. It came boy and named him Mark. These are small stuff, right? Say he had a 50-50 chance. But how many times have you heard that he got it wrong? I've never heard a story where Pope Carolus said I was going to have a boy and I had a girl instead. He would touch people and they would be healed. We call these saints, we call them miracle workers. There's another word in the liturgy here, thaumaturgos, thaumaturgist. That's an actual English word, a miracle worker, a wonder worker. Is there a God? This is very important for us because we destroy this idea of 2 floors. Yes, we understand that heaven is a place, but more importantly, in our faith, God is with us. What is His name? His name is Emmanuel. God is with us. And this has to be very important for us to understand that we can't turn a corner, we can't hide in our rooms, we can't go under our beds, we can't go anywhere where God is not.
Are you saying that the word or the definition of secularism started when humanity started?
No, secularism is this idea, and it came over time. It's this idea that we can just live in this world without God or the church or anybody religious telling me what to do. I can sell it to you. I'm a human being, right? Me as a human being. Because I'm a human being, I believe that I'm entitled to certain dignity, certain civil rights, right? So does Mina. So I'm going to treat him the way I want to be treated. I don't need a God to tell me that. I understand this because I personally don't want to be treated in a certain way. So people over time have developed this understanding and this idea. And they usually develop it because religion is constricting. God, a belief in a God is such a constricting idea that I can't live my life, that I want to be happy,
Well, what about people that say, I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual.
Yeah. So
Is that...
we're playing with definitions. Because religion, we can go a step further and say, Christianity is not a religion. It's a way of life. And a religion is, here's your God, and here are your rules that you have to follow, and you follow it strictly, and now you're part of a religion, part of a cult, part of a belief. Christianity is Christ came, and we worship Him, and we're looking for Him to come. And it's, we say, well, we have rules. Yeah, we have all of these rules. It's so that we can be closer or understand Christ more and be in a relationship with Him and open ourselves up to a relationship with Him. We are not legalists, right? You can have one person who comes and says, Abuna, there's too many rules in our church. And I'll tell you the one essence of all the rules, that's what you were thinking, huh? There's so many rules in our church. Every rule has one goal, the salvation of the person, right? So Mina comes and he confesses a sin to me. And I tell him, Mina, I need you to take communion next week, right? Fadi comes and he tells me, he confesses the same sin. I say, Fadi, don't even come to church for 1 month, right? Two different people, same different rule, same sin, but the idea is that this person needs to take communion for his salvation. This person needs to learn. This person needs some time away to make it solid within his mind. It's not a rule that we're enforcing. The spirit of it is always the salvation of the person. Why are we fasting? Because the church is saying to us, there's no other way you can get to where you need to go without fasting. God is not looking to see if you had, whatever, cheese or milk or whatever, but we know that this is what we need to do to our bodies in order to open up our spirits. I'll give you another example. I have $10 and I go and I buy $10 worth of rice and I eat all of that rice, or I eat 3 bites of that rice and I throw away the rest. Secularism, as well as capitalism, says that is fine. This is yours. This is yours. You bought it. You could do whatever you want with it. If you wanted to buy it and throw it immediately in the garbage, that's fine. You bought it. It's yours. Right? But what is our initial gut reaction? It's wasteful, and my brother, who is hungry, could use that food. Where did this come from? This comes from our church. This comes from our teachings, our expanding our mind beyond what is just in front of us. And here's really the goal and the point of it all, is that we always live with the fear of God, in the fear of God, and we always live with God in front of us. In front of us. You know what is an attack? I said, what was the attack on secularism? It's an attack on me, on the human, and essentially on worship. When we think about it, and when we talk to ourselves, talk between us and our spiritual fathers, if I got a busy day of studying, right, what's the first thing that gets tossed out the window? Church. What else? Prayers? Bible? Right? How many of us, if we have a busy day of studying, say, I'm not eating today. I am not going to brush my teeth today. Right? How many of us skip brushing our teeth? Raise your hand so we can laugh at you. George, put your hand down. So, how many of us say, I'm not going to comb my hair? Well, maybe you too. But for the most part, you guys know what I'm getting at, right? It's completely flipped on its head. We're completely putting the bread of this world in front of the bread of that world. None of what we do in this world matters. If all the end result is getting a grade on a paper, or getting a job, or making money, that all is the bread that Christ was being asked to change stones into. None of that matters. There's a nice saying that I saw in a movie a long time ago. I won't tell you what movie it is, but it stuck in my mind, and I share it with you. It's this idea that we are polishing the Titanic. It's all going down. right? Polishing the Titanic means nothing. This is what we do with our life. Because we've been convinced, we've been fooled that I need to pay attention to this world and I don't need to pay so much attention to the world to come. Or I can get by, just by saying an Our Father here or showing up to church right before the gospel, right? We just want to slide into our seat right before the gospel so that legally, according to the rules, we're allowed to take communion. Because in my mind, I have my life to live. Whereas in my mind, in the Orthodox Church, there's no other place to be but here. During times of prayer, this is where we are. Because this is the presence of God. This is where we want to be, right? Ultimately, we're Christians, and we're saying to ourselves, we want to be in the kingdom of heaven when the time comes. We want to be in the kingdom of heaven forever and ever and ever. A kingdom that has no end. So if I really mean that, then I come at the beginning of liturgy because it's where I celebrate that. I begin to celebrate being in the kingdom. You see, my beliefs don't match up with my actions. Or what I should be believing doesn't match up exactly with my actions. Many times we could get caught up in something, right? Because I am in this world, right? But when my mind is completely shedding this world, then the more important things are, when I wake up in the morning, it's not to check my phone or my Facebook or whatever. That when I wake up in the morning, I check my Egbeya. I open my Egbeya up. I pray. Because my life is a life of prayer. And this is how we begin to destroy secularism. This idea that God is not here. That the angels are not here. That the saints are not here. And I was speaking to the congregation last Sunday about a story that happened in St. Anthony's Monastery. Not the one here, but the one in Egypt. Where a little girl was brought, of a Bedouin tribe, was brought to the church. They said there's something wrong with her, and they discovered she had a demon within her. So they said, okay, let her attend Vespers. So they brought her inside the church. And when the monk was going to ring the door, the bell, so ring the bell to call people to pray, the demon cried out within the woman and said, don't ring the bell. Please don't ring the bell. And the monk asked, why not? He says, because you don't understand, when you ring the bell, it's not just the living that come, but those that have passed on before us, the monks, the saints, the angels, they fill this space. And something along the lines of, I can't stand it. I can't be here in that presence of all those people. So the monk rang the bell and the demon fled the body. Right? It wasn't an exorcism. It was a call to prayer that brought the demon, brought fear to the demon and cast him out of the woman. This is very powerful. Because when we stand up to pray, whether it be in our home alone or whether it be here, we stand up in the presence of saints, of angels. Right? How many of you, when you pray the Lord's Prayer, you say, Our Father who art in heaven, right? But you're standing alone. So do you change it to my Father who is in heaven? Give me my daily bread. Do we change it to the singular? It's always the plural. Because we're always in the church praying. And when, he's praying the first hour, and you're praying the first hour, and you're praying the first hour, you're all in the company of saints. You're all together in the one place. And how many of us have problems and issues in our lives? Right? That we just want some help from God. Right? But what we do is we ask God to help us. Right? And then we go on with our daily life. But what we need to start doing is living in the presence of God. And trusting that He sees everything. And trusting that He is going to help us and guide us. We don't have that trust because we don't have that faith. And we don't have that faith because we're not living that life. And that's really the problem. I mean, that's the problem. You want the faith, you want the trust. Well, it starts with living that life. And it's a small thing. I stand up, I say my prayers. Before I eat, I say my prayers. When I get in the car, I do the sign of the cross. When I get to class, I say, God, help me. Everything, every corner that I turn, I'm talking to God. People might think you're talking to yourself. And then you could tell them this whole speech that I just gave you, that actually we're in the presence of angels and saints. When we talk about relics of saints, right? When we talk about icons, we talk about doing the sign of the cross. This is our church teaching us how to defeat the ideas of this world. Because the ideas of this world is destroying us, especially when we let it come in, slowly but surely. How does the devil, what's the devil's best way of attacking us? It's never, like a surprise attack with all of his ammunition. It's more subtle. It's always more subtle. What ends up happening is somebody, think of a flock of sheep. One sheep is separated, not by much, just a little bit, and then a little bit more, and then a little bit more, and then finally the sheep is alone. Right? So what does that look like in real life? Separated just a little bit, I stop saying my prayers. A little bit more, I stop going to meetings, I stop going to church, I stop going to... And then all of a sudden I have these ideas. Maybe God doesn't exist. Because, I have all these problems, I have all these issues. And we try to flip our lives around and we say, God is the one that's doing this to me. Right? As if God is the one, pulling the trigger, or God is the one that's, messing with your life just to make you upset, just to make you, hurt. That's not the case. How it's supposed to be is when I'm in the church, when I'm in the body of Christ, when these things affect me, I don't go to God and I say, why God? I just say, how long am I going to have to deal with this? How long am I have to go through this, right? This is a different way of going about it. When we're in it, and we know God is with us, then we know that He's going to get us out of it. Right? Think about Jonah, right? Jonah kind of screws up a little bit, finds himself in the belly of the whale. In that prayer, he knows that God is going to save him. He's just waiting for the salvation of the Lord. What we lack in this world, because we have, we're a product of our society, and what society is doing to us is we get everything so quickly, is that when we don't get what we need from Christ or from God, we lose faith. What we need is patience, patient endurance. Patient endurance, you can see this phrase a couple times in the Bible, and it is extremely important, especially in James chapter 1. He says, blessed is the man who endures temptation, trials, tribulations. Because after he endures for a while, patiently, he will receive the crown of life. We are not complete individuals. And so God is shaping us. God is forming us. God is working with us. Something bad happens to us, it's not a curse. Something bad happens to us, it's not a curse. Something good happens to us, it's not necessarily a blessing. You always have to be neutral with what you receive. Something bad happens, we say, the Lord gives, the Lord takes, blessed be the Lord. But I'm not super elated with the successes, and I'm not brought down with the failures. Because what we find is that God is present everywhere. Where was He with the three holy youth? In the fiery furnace. Was the fiery furnace not a fiery furnace? Was it a pretend fiery furnace? But He gave them power to overcome that. Became a garden. Like a garden with dew, I think was the description in Daniel. He is able, He is there, He's present. He never leaves us. With the story of Israel through the desert, even though it was their mistake that they were in the desert for 40 years, it was their problem. God never left them. He still stayed with them. If I think that God is in heaven and that my life on earth, I'm just going to live my life according to what I need to do, and I separate in my mind God time from earth time, God paying attention to my spiritual life and just paying attention to my earthly life, if I do that, then the earth, then the world, then society has convinced me of secularism. And we have to always fight against this. What do we have? I'm sure there's some questions, but can we talk about this practically? A little bit more practically? Let's say aside from prayers, right? Aside from prayers. I told you guys that's a good practical way of destroying secularism. What's the next step? You guys are all in school, right? Right. When you guys are studying for exams or just paying attention to lectures or whatever, you kind of feel like you turn off religion, right, for a little bit, God, and you focus on what the professor is saying or what the studies are there for, right? We all do that. Now, how can we work God into that? So it's not so separated.
If you're having an issue with a specific subject, you can always ask for guidance. Or before every lecture, you can pray.
Yeah, is that something ridiculous? I mean, you don't have to stand up, face the east, do the full thing, but, it's about lifting your heart up to God. What's another thing? That's very important. What's another thing?
Are we still talking about studying?
Yeah, it could be, or it could be something else, whatever. It could be other things.
Well, you can see like God's glory whenever you're studying. For example, like for bio, you can see like God's creation and prayer be pretty much glorified
Yeah.
for what He does.
And isn't that a beautiful thing when the professor is talking about some molecular whatever and you just say, that's awesome, God. That's really cool. Isn't that nice to just raise that prayer up? That I just hope I can remember it for the exam, but it's really cool right now. What are some other things? If we move, let's say we move past studying. I'm gonna nail you guys with something. How many of us are at home? Mom, Dad asks us to do something. We're like, oh man, my son who's 5, I almost ripped his head off because he kept saying, oh man. And I'm like, I just asked you to put your plate in the sink, That's our reaction, right? Why is that our reaction? How can we kind of flip that around? Right? What can we do? Come on. I think there's something we can think about when our parents ask us, how can we make it into something more spiritual? Harder, right? But I'll tell you how's a way that we could do this. I'll tell you a way that we could do this. First off, if I asked you guys to do something, right? If I happened to be at your house and I asked you for a cup of water, right? You'd get it from me, right? So if somebody in your house, if your family asks you for a cup of water, the response shouldn't be get it yourself, or you got legs, or the fridge is right there. It should be like, okay, right? Aren't we servants? Don't we want to be servants in the sense that we're serving God? One time, I just said to God, you know what? I'm going to test you. And I tested him. I said, not in a bad way. I said, look, I will do anything anyone tells me to do today. But I want to feel like I'm doing it for you. Right? Anything that anyone asks me. And of course, I was like, hopefully nobody asks me for all my money. Hopefully nobody, these types of things. Although I was a poor college student, so it didn't really matter. But I said, I'll do it, but I need to know in my heart that you're the one asking me to do this. So that when my mom or my dad or my brother, sister, whatever asks me to do something, I feel like I'm serving God. Hadr. Right? Because we would do exactly that, what God wanted us to do. And it's a good way to start the day because people are going to ask you to do things during the day. Right? And we ask God to give us the strength and the ability to do it. Right? What's another way that we could sort of fight against this? What about when somebody says, talks about the sufferings in this world and the problems, and we say that God is the one, God is the one that they think God is the one that's doing all of this. What's a way that we can, without arguing with the person, what's a way that we could handle that situation? But let's say somebody says, what about what the Nazis did, the killing of millions of Jews, the genocide of the Armenians, the Rwandans, where was God in all of this? The typhoon that killed a couple 100,000 about 5-10 years ago. Where was God in all of this? What do we say? I can give you an answer, but I'm hoping that you guys will come up with one. What would we say in the face of that? How about somebody else? Let's get somebody else.
There was a talk a couple weeks ago, and he was talking about the subject. He said because God have control over evil. God cannot control evil, and He gave man free will. And if man uses evil, because he has free will, that's just man. It's not God.
So, I mean, we can, if you wanted to get into arguments, you can. You could say, look, I'm subject to somebody else's free will, right? God can't work that free person's free will. So, like, let's say I drive home, right, and I'm, God forbid, I get hit by a drunk driver. That drunk driver had free will, chose to do this, chose to get in the car, chose to drive, and now I am the victim of that free will. But let's say the typhoon. Let's talk about the typhoon that killed hundreds of thousands of people in Southeast Asia. There's a natural disaster. There is an argument that we can have. This is all called apologetics, defending God. But what is it? I'm trying to say more kind of like a gut reaction. What's a more gut reaction that we could do for that person?
It's not something that's going to like comfort him. It's something that's going to comfort me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna slowly have doubts. Why don't we pray for that person? Isn't that standing in this person is saying God doesn't exist because of this issue, and I stand in the face of that and I say, yeah, you do, God. I know you exist. I see and feel you. Have this person see and feel you. Right? Can't we pray for these people? Isn't that our presence in this world, to be a light to others? I don't have to say anything, but I have to be confident in my heart that God exists. And I should care that this person should see God as well. What happens when somebody says to us, it's all the same, Buddha, or forget about Buddha, the God of the Muslims and the Jews and our God, it's all the same, it doesn't matter. What's our reaction to that? Because secularism would say, yeah, it doesn't matter. Whatever. It's a choice. It's relative. That person was born Muslim and they're a good Muslim. That person was born Jew and they're a good Jew. So why should I, even care about this situation?
You said it earlier. You said we believe that Jesus came and then He's coming and He would save us and He's coming again, but they don't believe the same thing.
Right. I mean, there are things here when we talk about truth at the heart of it. We talk about truth. Truth is unwavering. Truth is not what's true for me, it's true for you, or not true for you. Truth is truth. If there is a God, I want to follow that God. If it happens to be the God of the Jews or of the Muslims, I want to know that. And I'm serious. I don't want to be locked in a religion or in Christianity if it's not the right faith. I'm always asking God to show Himself to me. I'm always asking God in a sense that I want to know that I'm not in just the right path. I want to be in, the path to Him. I want this for somebody else too. Right? When I say, hallowed be thy name, not just in me. I don't want His name just to be holy in me. I want His name to be holy in everybody and glorified in everybody and sanctified in everybody. So again, it's a prayer.
So I have a question. We know that, let's say, God, there's one God, there's one truth. But sometimes we say, if you're not a Christian, we know the Bible is saying you're not going to heaven, but it's up to God. Why do we add but?
No, we should even kind of go back further. We know that God is judge, right? Period. That's it. We just end it. If what we believe is true, then we know that God as judge will judge us according to what we do, our deeds. And our deeds don't just mean giving a Snickers bar to a homeless man or something. Our deeds also include our prayer life, our baptism, our communion, all of that. So when we say God is judge, we say God is judge. If you believe this, we will tell you exactly what we believe. But I am not going to put myself in the place of judge and then start talking about other people outside of the faith. So we have to be very careful because we say don't judge, and yet we are so quick to judge. Right? We can't, and we have to sort of cut that off immediately at the head. But what I would say is that if somebody were coming to you as a good person, you would tell them about Christ in a heartbeat. You would tell them about Christ, even though they're a good person. And the example of this is Cornelius in Acts chapter 10. He was a good person. He was a God-fearing man. He gave money to the temple. And yet, God sent him, Peter, to baptize him, even though he's a Gentile, and to make him a Christian. Right? And so this has to be our attitude, that there has to be a desire in our heart for the salvation of others. A desire in our heart for the salvation of others. Again, we are destroying this idea of, I'm at school, right? Or I'm at work. I don't have to worry about this person's salvation. Right? But if I'm at church and one of my brothers or my sisters starts straying, all of a sudden I'm concerned about them. Right? I have to destroy this idea of God time, church time, and then, world time. This is all that I'm kind of throwing at you with these examples. Right? And then it comes up in, I'm playing a basketball game. I'm watching a basketball game. Certain words shouldn't come out of my mouth because as if I'm always in the church. Like if I foul somebody hard, I should feel bad about it, right? I shouldn't think about that person deserved it. I should pick him up. Like that is the Christian attitude. And then we go on to, can I go to a club? Can I go to a bar? Can I go to a place that I can't take God with me? I know it sounds corny, right? Would you take St. Mary to this place? No, I wouldn't take St. Mary's. But now we're making the argument that God is always with us, right? So God is always with us. Now there's stories of Russian monks that would go to the bars in order to get people out of them. And there are people that go to coffee shops, priests and stuff would go to the coffee shops and kind of their service and ministry would be there, right? So they were taking God with them. This has to be our mentality. If I'm at a party, if I'm at a friend's house, if things shift in the conversation, right? I should immediately back myself out. I can't talk about this stuff. I don't want to listen to this stuff. I don't want to see this stuff. All of that should immediately bring me out, right? I think I've talked about this enough. Any questions? Final thoughts? Do we know what we're talking about? Do you know what we're talking about?
Like the main topic, but I picked up the last two.
So we're talking about secularism and how secularism is this idea in this world given to us that there's non-religious things and there are religious things. There are things that belong to God and there are things that belong to everyday living. Changing the oil in the car, going to a basketball game, all that stuff. I go to a museum, my studies, all that stuff is secular, and what I have in church and at home and when the priest visits, all that stuff is religious. Religion is good, but it's not necessary. I could be a good person without it. I could do good things without it. I don't need a religion to tell me what to do. I can be a very good, rich doctor or businessman. I don't need religion to tell me how to manage my money or do anything with that stuff. But what we say is that there is no time without God, there is no place without God, and there's no life without God. Man, we took that verse, man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God. Man does not live by bread alone is clear when Christ says, I am the bread of life. So life is the key word there, and our life is with Him in heaven, not here on earth. So what I study, the amount of money I make, the type of food I eat, the clothes I wear, the house I live in, the car I drive, all of that doesn't matter. Our ancestors a long time ago would have made us a pyramid and put all that stuff in there, or tried to, so that we could take it to the afterlife, but we can't take it to the afterlife, right? We can't take nothing. So the idea is, there is no time, the idea is my life depends on the food I give my spirit. The Eucharist, my reading of the Bible, time in prayer, constantly, just the Jesus prayer, all that stuff is essential for my spiritual life. I fast, I pray, I give alms, because God is always in my presence, and I will be judged eventually, and I know that I want to be with Him in heaven. Yeah, wow. I can't keep repeating this. So now, afterwards, there's two other things that we talked about Him being taken to the pinnacle of the temple, right? Throw yourself and the angels will catch you, right? One thing Christ could have said, and it would have been really cool if He did say, He said, look, the angels are surrounding me. They're all around me. I don't need to throw myself from a building to see if the angels are here. I know God is here. Right? Remember that he said to Peter when he took out his sword, don't you know I could call on my Father who would send me 12,000 angels right now? I don't need to throw myself from the temple. And then he says, oh, worship me here on this mountain and I'll give you the entire world. The entire world is mine. I am God. Right? He could have just said that I am God. Of course he's saying, get behind me, Satan. You should only worship the Lord your God, but he is God. And the world, even though Satan is the prince of this world, God is still Pantokrator. He's still in charge. He's still Dabat al-Kul. And this is important for us because then we realize God is with me in the sufferings, God is with me in the successes, God is with me all the time. And so are his angels. And so are his saints. And so there is no separation between here and there. It's all present. And a nice church, in the nice churches we have icons all over the place, which is beautiful. And we always have this idea that they are here with us. When we come to prayer, they are waiting for us to join them in this prayer. Right? So this is all the stuff that we have around us is gearing us towards this mentality. Monica. Or Marina, sorry.
The Malachi story that you told on Sunday?
The what?
The Malachi story that you told on Sunday? The story about the priest that came.
Keep going. I'm trying to remember it.
It's when a monk was reading the Bible.
Oh, yeah, this is awesome. So Saint Shenouda, the Archimandrite. Saint Shenouda, the Archimandrite, was watching one of his disciples, one of his monks, reading the 12 prophets. And as he's reading each prophet, you guys know the 12 prophets, right? What is it? Daniel, Hosea, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, Ezekiel, Daniel, Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi, right? So he's watching this monk read all 12. And so first, when he's reading Hosea, the prophet Hosea stands next to him. And then next, when he was reading Joel, the prophet Joel is standing next to him. He's seeing all of the prophets there. And then when the guy gets to Malachi, he dozes off and he falls asleep. And Malachi is standing there. And so Saint Shenouda says in the story, kicked him, woke him up, and he says, finish reading Malachi so he can go back. This is to tell you that we are in the presence of the saints. That's why every time we say here, reading from St. Paul, may his blessings be upon us all, amen, because he's here. St. Paul is here reading to us his words. The gospel writer, the psalm, all of that, we always say, may their blessings be upon us. It's because they're here with us. This is, again, destroying that idea that they're up there and we're down here. No, they are with us. And we enter into that life with them. If you're embarrassed about some of the things you do, you should be. Right? Because they're with us. We want to try to be like them. And that's not a bad thing. Better to be like them and failures in this world than like successes in this world and failures in their minds. All right. Okay, I talked a lot. Sorry, guys. All right.